His name was Jonathan James, but online he was known as Comrade. He wasn't some seasoned hacker lurking in the shadows of the dark web. He was a kid, a teenager from Florida, just 15 years old. Most kids his age were worried about homework and acne. Jonathan? He was breaking into the most secure networks on Earth, just to see if he could. It started with curiosity. Not malice, not greed, just raw, obsessive curiosity. He taught himself to code, learned the architecture of networks, read everything he could about operating systems and exploits. While other kids were playing video games, Jonathan was exploring the digital veins of the US government. Even as a young boy, he was different. Not socially withdrawn, but not like everyone else either. Teachers described him as brilliant but bored, disinterested in rote memorization, but instantly alert when things turned complex. His parents knew he was gifted. He would dismantle electronics just to rebuild them better. The kid was building scripts before most teens could do long division. There was a quiet intensity in him, a need to understand the rules so he could break them just enough to prove he understood them better than the people who wrote them. And by the time most of us were still fumbling with email passwords, Jonathan was inside the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the branch of the Department of Defense responsible for analyzing threats to U.S. national security. He didn't just breach it. He read internal emails, captured usernames and passwords, installed backdoors to slip in and out whenever he pleased, and then, just to prove to himself that he could, he aimed higher. NASA. He broke into NASA's systems and accessed source code for the International Space Station's life support systems. That's not science fiction. That's real. NASA had to shut down their entire network for 21 days while they investigated. The damages? $41,000. But the value of the code he accessed? $1.7 million, according to NASA. It was so sensitive. Parts of it were classified. And what did he do with it? Nothing. He didn't sell it, didn't publish it, didn't destroy anything. He was there for one reason: to learn, to see how far he could go. It wasn't a heist. It was a challenge. But in the eyes of the U.S. government, he wasn't a curious teenager. He was a national security threat. So they came for him, guns drawn, SWAT teams raided his home, his computers were seized, his life was turned upside down in a matter of hours. And the media? They devoured the story. He wasn't a kid anymore. He was a cyber terrorist. In 2000, Jonathan James became the first juvenile in the United States to be incarcerated for cybercrime. He was sentenced to 6 months under house arrest, probation until he turned 18, and was forbidden from touching a computer. For a boy who lived in the digital world, that was like being told not to breathe. Most people would have broken, but Jonathan didn't. He kept his head down, complied, and for a while it looked like he might turn the corner. He got a job, kept his profile low. He was brilliant. Everyone who met him said so. Even the agents who arrested him couldn't deny how smart he was. But brilliance doesn't come with armor. It doesn't shield you from paranoia, or fear, or the weight of being misunderstood. The world wouldn't let him move on. In 2007, years after he served his sentence, the U.S. government began investigating a massive cyber attack on TJX, the parent company of TJ Maxx. Tens of millions of customer records had been stolen. It was one to make headlines for weeks, one of the largest data breaches in U.S. history at the time, and somehow Jonathan's name came up. There was no proof, no charges, but the suspicion was enough. The Secret Service raided his house again. It was déjà vu, only worse. This time, he wasn't a rebellious teen. He was an adult trying to put his life back together. And once again, it was shattered. Jonathan swore he had nothing to do with it. Friends say he was adamant. He was clean. He had stayed out of trouble, but the damage was done. He spiraled. He became withdrawn, paranoid, and deeply anxious. He believed he was being framed, that the government needed a fall guy, and they had chosen him. In private, he expressed fear that no matter what he did, his past would never let go. Fear that he'd never escape the shadow of Comrade. He was watching the walls close in, even if no one else could see them. He told close friends he was worried they'd try to pin the entire breach on him. He didn't believe justice was even possible anymore. And that fear wasn't unfounded. The U.S. government had a track record of leaning on people like him, people who didn't have the resources or influence to fight back. Surveillance, interrogation, and psychological pressure were real weapons. Jonathan wasn't just afraid of being accused. He was afraid of being erased, slowly, legally, completely. This is where the legal system reveals its worst flaw. It doesn't know what to do with brilliance. It knows how to punish, how to confine, how to pressure, but it doesn't know how to mentor. It doesn't know how to rehabilitate someone whose crime was being too far ahead of his time. And in the U.S. justice system, once you're marked, that mark never fades. No matter how young you were, no matter how much you've changed. To understand Jonathan's mind in those final months, you have to understand the world he lived in. A digital world, yes, but also one where redemption was nearly impossible. Where your teenage mistakes followed you into adulthood like a scarlet letter burned onto your resume. Where every job, every application, every future door had a shadow looming behind it. He had been a prodigy. Now, he felt like a prisoner of his own past. In May 2008, just 18 months after the second raid, Jonathan James was found dead in his bathroom, a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was 24 years old. In his suicide note, he wrote, "I have no faith in the justice system. Perhaps my actions today, in this letter, will send a stronger message to the public." His story isn't just a tragedy, it's a reckoning, a warning of what happens when we treat intelligence as a threat, when we see gifted young minds as enemies instead of potential allies, when we chase talent with badges and guns instead of mentorship and opportunity. Jonathan James could have been a top engineer at NASA. He could have secured government systems. He could have helped build the future. But instead, we made him a criminal. We punished brilliance. We snuffed out potential. And we lost one of the sharpest minds of a generation. He wasn't a villain. He was a kid, a prodigy, a digital pioneer. He had the makings of a legend, and we buried him before he could become one. And he deserved better. How many more Jonathan Jameses are out there, ignored, punished, and pushed into darkness, when all they really need is a chance to be understood? How much genius have we lost, not to war or disease, but to bureaucracy and fear? This wasn't just a hacker story, it was an American tragedy, a system too slow to understand, too quick to condemn. And unless something changes, unless we learn to recognize and support the brilliance that walks among us, we'll keep writing the same story again and again. Different names, same ending. But maybe this time, if we're paying attention, we can change the next chapter. Maybe the next comrade will be hired instead of hunted, heard instead of silenced, protected instead of punished. Maybe genius won't have to die in the shadows anymore. Thanks for watching. If you want more true stories they never taught you in school, real people, real consequences, subscribe to Curriculum Rejects. New episodes every week. Stay curious.